but Nicole had neuropathies. She had carpal tunnel and ulnar neuropathies and everything, and fibromyalgia, just terrible. And it was just, I mean, she was miserable. And that just got better.
Oh,
and
wow.
so it was kind of like an answer to prayer for her. And she's like, so she made a deal with God that if he made her better, she would help. So then she said, I'm getting one of these.
General health and wellness, which there's a large amount of people just doing that. But then we also have wound care. We have stroke victims. We've had people with PTSD. We've had people with depression.
Welcome to Spotlight Sioux Falls, where culture meets commerce and the people behind our favorite places get the mic.
We're your hosts, Melissa Goodwin and Steve Schmidt, and we're sitting down with the makers, doers, and dreamers shaping the soul of our city.
From storefronts to side hustles, tattoos to tech startups, we are telling the stories that make Sioux Falls shine.
Because behind every business is a human story, and those stories, they're what make our community feel like home. This is Spotlight Sioux Falls. All right, well, welcome today. This episode of Spotlight Sioux Falls, we're in a pretty cool place here. I'm here with Dr. Todd, and we are in, tell us where we are.
We're at T Airport, Lincoln County Airport, yep.
The Lincoln County Airport. And we've got a couple of pretty cool devices that we're going to talk about here in a second. But Dr. Todd is an ENT surgeon. You are an entrepreneur.
I guess
and
so,
yeah, I guess now you are, and a pilot. What don't you do?
Well, not a real pilot. I say I'm a good flyer, but I'm actually a sport pilot. But no, I didn't get into flying until I was 52, so that was kind of a late start for that. And then as far as the hyperbaric stuff, that just started this year.
Yeah, so as an entrepreneur, you own Midwest Hyperbarics, and we're here in this hangar today for a reason. There's kind of a common through line between all of your, what we see here today and Midwest Hyperbarics. So as an ENT surgeon, you deal a lot with pressure. Obviously, when you fly, there's some pressure components to that, and obviously with Midwest Hyperbarics, there's a pressure component. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, hyperbaric medicine. So, baric is kind of probably the Latin derivative, I think, of pressure anyway. And so hyper is high pressure, and pressure really trumps oxygen or anything. It's the pressure that matters. It's kind of fascinating too. We're sitting here at about 1,500 feet above sea level, and our pressure, because we have 100,000 feet of air on top of us, is about 14, 15 psi.
Okay.
And so if you take this gyroplane, you could actually go up 30,000 feet, and the pressure becomes so low that you can't absorb, even though it's 20% oxygen like it is here, you can't absorb the oxygen. And then if you go in these chambers behind us, or in front of us, they go down 30 feet underwater, 60 feet underwater, and the pressure will drive oxygen into your system. So pressure is actually more important than the oxygen concentration as far as the healing. But it's interesting, with the biggest thing when you're flying, you're clearing your ears, and you have to change because you have these air-containing spaces, and you have to open your eustachian tubes to clear your ears. Same thing when you're going under these into the hyperbaric chambers. You're constantly clearing your ears because you're dropping down so fast.
So is that what's happening when I go up in the plane and I'm there's a certain altitude that you hit, and you always have that, like the popping feel? Yeah. What's happening in your ears?
Yeah, well, so the eustachian tubes are normally closed, and you have an air pocket in your middle ear behind your eardrum.
Okay.
And especially when you're landing, the babies start crying because they can't clear their ears. And everybody else, you look around, everybody's yawning, popping, clearing, opening their ears because as you're getting down, the pressure's getting higher, and you need to equalize that by opening the eustachian tubes. And so, so yeah, it is. It's way more extreme in water because, 100,000 feet of air is probably equal to 30 feet of water, as far as changing. If you go 30 feet down, you're at 2 atmospheres, and if you go 60 feet underwater, you're at 3 atmospheres.
Okay.
But that pressure is more important than what drives the oxygen into the tissues. And so I think we were talking about, if we're at sea level here, and the oxygen concentration is about 21%. And it's the same if you go 30,000 feet in the air. It's still 20% oxygen, but the pressure's so low, it's equivalent to 6% oxygen. I don't remember that golfer. What was that guy's name again? I talked to you about
Payne Stewart?
Payne Stewart.
Yeah.
So they were flying, and they were in a plane at 30,000, 40,000 feet or whatever, and they normally would have a pressurized cabin. So the pressure keeps that 20% of oxygen into your lungs. Well, they apparently depressurized.
Okay.
And so they're flying up there, and then the air became so thin and no tension to push the oxygen into them, they all passed out. And then the plane flew into South Dakota and crashed because they were all passed out. And it's all because of the pressure. But even if you're at 40,000 feet and you're breathing 100% oxygen, you're still going to pass out because there's no pressure. And you can't,
got it.
it doesn't push the air into your lungs. You can live in this hyperbaric chamber with a hemoglobin of 0. If you're at 3 atmospheres and 100% oxygen, a guy in Dr. Boersma's name was in 1959, he exsanguinated these pigs essentially and put just clear plasma in them. And because they were at 100% oxygen and all that pressure, the pigs lived just fine.
Okay.
With a hemoglobin of 0. And if you would have cut them open, instead of red blood, it would have been clear serum.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
And then he replenished their blood, and they were fine, and they came out with no sequela. So you can live in a chamber. You know, they were doing open heart surgery in a hyperbaric operating room, but it's kind of cumbersome to get.
Right, to get all the materials and things in there. So we're going to talk a little bit about your company, Midwest Hyperbarics, in a second. But tell us, it sounds like that hyperbaric oxygen therapy is not new. It's been something that's been around for a while. So tell us a little bit about the history, because it feels like it's new to us, or maybe new to the population. Tell us about like the history of.
Well, it was, I think, one of the. You know, it's been, if you look at the books, there's something where someone had a high pressure chamber in the 1600s or the 1700s, but I think that really came to light around the time when they were building the Brooklyn Bridge, and they were lowering these men down in what they called caissons. And they would lower them down, and they'd pump room air, or just regular air down there to keep them open, and they'd be working way deep underwater.
Okay.
To build these footings for what is now the Brooklyn Bridge. And then they would be working down there for hours and hours, and then they'd bring them up. And what would happen is the nitrogen and the oxygen, it was 80% nitrogen, 20% oxygen, had been pushed into their tissues into a liquid. And as they came up, it came out of solution into bubbles. And so they have these bubbles throughout their body. And it was incredibly painful, and they didn't know what to do. There's no, it's kind of like a kidney stone. I don't know if you ever had a kidney stone. I did it. They call it the bends, though. You were bending over. There's no comfortable position, and a lot of them died from the nitrogen bubbles would bubble up in their tissues, and it's an inert gas, and it would just wreck everything.
Oh, sounds
And so
awful.
they discovered that if they put them back down, then those symptoms would go away, because then the bubbles got pushed back into solution because the pressure's way higher down there.
Sorry, you got to go back down for a couple days.
Well, and then they found, and the Navy divers just, they've got this all worked out with these Navy tables, the exact. But if you replace the nitrogen with oxygen, your body can use that oxygen, so it's not an inert gas.
Okay.
And then they could bring them up slowly, and then the body could metabolize the oxygen off, and then bring them up a little bit, and then slowly bring them up, and they wouldn't get the bends, or decompression sickness. They also called it caissons disease because they were in these caissons.
Sure.
But that's kind of what triggered that.
You mentioned a hotel that was built too in Cleveland, which is kind of wild.
They figured out that the therapeutic benefits of compressing oxygen, it's physics, and it's amazing because we have Boyle's law and all these different laws about temperature, pressure, and then whatever things are in a liquid or gaseous state.
Yeah.
And so they knew that.
PV equals nRT, something like that. I remember
like
that from college.
Yeah.
One of the few things I remember.
But they found that they discovered oxygen, I think, in the late 1700s or something, and they figured out through a lot of chemistry that this oxygen is kind of the divine element.
Yeah.
It's what we use for our energy. We breathe it, and we exhale CO2. We eat, ingest, drink it. We get rid of it with CO2 and water and different things like that. And that oxygen is what gives us, goes into the mitochondria, gives us ATP and energy. It's all in our Krebs cycles and stuff. I don't want to go back to that
We
level.
could really nerd out here, but for the population, maybe we'll keep it high level.
But they discovered that pressure made a lot of things better. And so there was a lot of people kind of toying with the idea that people would get better. And so there were hyperbaric chambers came into existence. This guy Cunningham had had a huge hyperbaric dome, like a circle, like a sphere, in Cleveland in around 1925 or something, and it was a hyperbaric hotel or something, and he kept it at pretty high pressures, and they would swear that people would get better with like tuberculosis. This was prior to antibiotics too.
Okay.
And so, but there was a lot of
World's
medical
Fair,
advances.
like when would that have been around? Like the 30s, 40s, 50s?
It was around in the 30s.
30s, okay.
Late 20s, 30s. The AMA got after him because he wasn't doing his data collection correctly, and he didn't have a lot of good biostatistical analysis of things. Anyway, they kind of end up, labeling him as kind of a fraud or something. Although I think he had a lot of good thoughts in there, and they scrapped it in World War II. They needed all the metal and different things like that. But,
Okay.
But by then they had figured out what they could do with hyperbarics, and this Boersma guy, who was a cardiothoracic surgeon in Amsterdam, he was doing open heart surgery, and that's before they had ECMO, and they didn't know they were doing hypothermia and ECMO now, where they'd get the blood out of the patient, oxygenate over there and bring it back, and they'd take it away from the heart and they work on the heart. Well, he was working on the heart in a hyperbaric operating room. And so it's pretty incredible what you could do with just pushing oxygen into the tissues. And that's whenever you have an injury or you have a wound, there's always going to be edema, ischemia, and you can't get the blood to that area to heal. But if you pressurize oxygen, you don't need the blood. You can go into the serum and directly into the tissues.
Oh, interesting. So when you say edema or ischemia,
Yeah.
for those that maybe don't know, is that swelling, right?
Swelling. So if you have an injury, any kind of an injury,
Yeah.
then it's going to be kind of swollen, and you're
Yeah.
not going to be able to reoxygenate that. And
Got it.
That's what happens in any kind of injury, surgical injury or anything. And so we know that the hyperbaric oxygen is great to expedite healing. You see the people they say, oh, you have these 100% oxygen canisters and you're going to breathe, or you go to an oxygen bar. It doesn't do anything to you because at sea level, we saturate our hemoglobin almost always to 100%.
Okay.
And so by breathing 100% oxygen at sea level with the same pressure at 14 psi here, like we
Okay.
are, you're already saturating your hemoglobin.
But the bubbles look cool and it's bright colors and you're in Vegas
Yeah.
and you're hungover. It feels pretty
Yeah.
good.
But if you wanted to get more, a faster recovery or more endurance or
You need
something,
the pressure.
you need the pressure, or you could get more hemoglobin. That's what Lance Armstrong did.
Okay.
They would stop and they would have their own blood parked somewhere, and they'd stop and then they'd infuse themselves with extra red cells, so their
Okay.
hemoglobin went way up. So they were polycythemic, and then
What does that mean?
they had extra red cells.
Okay.
So they get so much blood cells, and they could carry more oxygen. That's why he won the Tour de France 7 times.
Okay.
He probably would have won it 5 times.
So is that still legal? Can you still do that?
No.
You don't recommend doing that. I shouldn't store my red blood cells in the fridge for later.
You can, but I guess are you gonna win a world
Probably
Tour
not.
de France?
Yeah,
or-
I'd probably need to lift a few more weights before that.
But with pressure, you don't even need the red cells. And that's
Okay.
And so what happens, like in diabetics, the blood vessels get damaged, or radiation, same
Sure.
thing. So when we radiate patients for cancer, especially in the head and neck, I do a lot of head and neck cancers, and we radiate them, and their necks become just rock hard. You may have seen laryngectomy patients, and their skin and then they might have a bone show up in their mouth, and they just won't heal. And it's because the microvasculature is so damaged from the radiation. The radiation killed the cancer, but unfortunately it killed a lot of
The good cells
vessels too.
Yeah.
And so, but by using hyperbaric oxygen, we can kind of pick the bone out, and then we can get that area to heal.
Okay.
And that's the same thing we do with diabetic foot ulcers and wounds that won't heal, to kind of hopefully avoid the next amputation. Because sometimes this versus this could be a big deal.
And once you start to amputate, then bad things happen traditionally.
Yeah.
So now we've maybe heard about hyperbaric oxygen treatments for wound care
Right,
specifically.
right.
And you started your clinic. Why? Why did you decide to go into this as a business?
Well, I've been using hyperbarics for my radiation cancer patients.
Okay.
Quite for 30 years now, and so I've used it, and I've kind of watched an interest. Michael Jackson slept in a chamber, and you see LeBron James is in a now, and you see more and more people are talking about all the athletes
Yeah.
are in chambers, and like, why are they doing that? It's kind of interesting. But what really got me into it was Nicole, my wife. She got talked into helping a lady with ulcerative colitis she was doing hyperbarics. They said, you're going to need a colectomy, you're going to die. And she goes, no, I'm not doing it. She did soft chambers out at the mall, and she got better. And the doctors were amazed. I mean, and so she got her own chamber, but she couldn't quite get into it. And so Nicole would go over there and help her get into it. And then she would get into it herself the lady said, well, you can use it too. So then she'd be, 2 hours for that, 2 hours for her. And so she's gone every night 5 hours. And then,
Are they really in the hyperbaric oxygen chamber?
But Nicole had neuropathies. She had carpal tunnel and ulnar neuropathies and everything, and fibromyalgia, just terrible. And it was just, she was miserable. And that just got better.
Oh,
and
wow.
So it was kind of like an answer to prayer for her. And she's like, so she made a deal with God that if he made her better, she would help. So then she said, I'm getting one of these. And then we looked into it and said, well, it's better to get a hard chamber. And so we got a hard chamber at home. And then she had it full with her sisters and her friends and family and everybody and all day long. And then she got another chamber at home. And then, because I said, I kind of like getting in it too. And it's like, this makes me feel better and makes my knees feel better. And I got bad old man knees. And so we got two, and then pretty soon she had those full all the time. I'd come home from work, and there's someone in the chair, and someone's in the chamber, and someone's waiting to get into the beamer, and they're baking sourdough bread, and it was just kind of a big thing. It's like, and then her daughter Jada got her nurse practitioner degree, and we're like, why don't we open a clinic, and then people want to be in our house?
Yeah.
And so that's really what. And then we tried to do it in my clinic at Midwest ENT, but. It was really Nicole's inspiration, and she wanted, and it's very difficult with 7 physicians
to
have your wife and I'm bringing these chambers in, and they're like, what? We have to have a meeting, and
right.
And you know how it is.
Makes sense.
Yeah. It's I know you and Steve work together well, but sometimes if you got all these partners, your partners say, I can't fire your wife.
Right. That makes it more complicated for sure. So what's the difference between, you mentioned the soft chambers at the mall. I've never seen the soft chambers at the mall. So tell me what the difference between something you might see at a mall versus what you have. And we'll go to your clinic to check it out here in a second. But tell us the difference clinically, between those two different devices.
It comes down to pressure.
Okay.
And then what's interesting though, that what's made that, why home chambers are really good, especially hard home chambers, is because of the advent of oxygen generation. We can generate oxygen extremely efficiently using electricity and getting the nitrogen off it, and you can do it at an instant and pump it in the chambers. You don't need to get tanks and everything.
Okay.
Now at our center, we use liquid oxygen and pressurized room air, but it's all about the pressure. So a soft chamber are much less expensive, but it's like a real thick tube or a thick bag or something. You get into it and it tightens up and you're in there, and it gets to about 1.5 atmospheres.
Okay.
Somewhere around 10, maybe 7 to 10 psi, I guess.
So when you say atmospheres, you mentioned that at sea level we're like 15,000 psi. Is that right? And that's 2 atmospheres. I'm trying to remember.
So we're 1,500 feet above sea level here in Sioux Falls, and but essentially we're level, and the oxygen and the pressure from the air on top of us is about 14 to 15 psi.
Okay.
And we call that 1 atmosphere.
Got it.
And so it's 1 atmosphere of air sitting on us. And if you go down underwater, and that's why they call it, they've kind of gotten extrapolated from the sea level, because it's much, instead of say 100,000 feet of air on top of you, we go down 30 feet, and that's 2 atmospheres. And so that's like another 15 psi.
Okay, got it. I'm with you.
But since we're here, we start at 0, we call it gauge pressure. And so gauge pressure is 0.
Got it.
And so we go down 30 feet underwater, we're at 15 psi, and we go down 60 feet underwater, and we're at 30 psi, or that's 3 atmospheres.
Okay.
And so, but the pressure is what makes it important. Now, I haven't really looked into why they do have chambers that go down to 6 psi for like people that are deep sea divers, but nobody treats anybody therapeutically above 3 atmospheres.
Why is that?
It just hasn't proved effective.
Diminishing returns?
Yeah, I haven't really studied why that is. But nobody makes any chambers. or nobody treats anybody. Matter of fact, most people treat at 2.5, 2.6 atmospheres, or even 2 atmospheres.
Okay.
I think more pressure is good because I'm always a more is better kind of guy. But these chambers go to 3. You know,
Okay.
they're very thick industrial medical chambers. And that chamber we have in the, you know, in the clinic that weighs 20,000 pounds can go up to, you know, 3 easily. But that's the difference. The soft chamber you just can't handle the pressure.
You can't get that far. So the stuff in Vegas, the oxygen bars are basically 0 pressure, right? Or one
So
one
if you
atmosphere.
have a pulmonary condition, if you have COPD,
Yeah.
and you see the people that have their oxygen, they actually have generators.
Cannula, yep.
So they can carry generators now, and they generate oxygen electrically instead of carrying tanks of oxygen.
Okay.
Some of them still carry tanks. But if you have COPD, then extra oxygen helps.
Sure.
And but if you're normal, and your SATs are 99%, which most people's are, then you can't saturate anymore. Your hemoglobin is saturated.
Got it. So you really do need to have at least, soft chamber helps a little bit, and then if you have a hard chamber with 2, that will go to 2 or 3 atmospheres, much more clinically effective.
So, and I do think that the advent of the oxygen generators and the advent of these 2 atmosphere chambers that are solid hard chambers that you can get in your home, those are really great for people with chronic conditions.
Okay.
Because we've actually sold a few for some people that want them in their home. They say, well, I feel great, but then if I don't keep doing it, I don't feel that great. If I have fibromyalgia, or if I have something chronic, and then if they can get that in their home, that's kind of a sweet spot where if you're at 2 atmospheres and you're generating 95% oxygen, and you can fall asleep in there, you won't get oxygen toxicity, you won't have a seizure, and it's very effective still. It's still a lot of pressure and still a lot of oxygen. It's a lot of therapy, and yet if you fell asleep in this thing and you're at 3 atmospheres and breathing 100%, you might all of a sudden start seizing, and you might
Got it.
and you can't get out of it. It's like, but so that's probably not something you'd want in your home unless you had an attendant.
So you mentioned, I had a friend who mentioned that, I've heard about people like burning up in these things.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about how you help from a safety perspective, or how you view this, and maybe what goes wrong in some of those incidences.
Well, that comes down to oxygen. Like I said, if you're at it, even with room air in these things, it's still the oxygen tension is higher at 2 atmospheres and 3 atmospheres. And so you have to kind of know that. I do tonsillectomies all the time, like tonsillectomies and airway surgeries, and we're using electric cautery.
Okay.
And then I got an ET tube, and they're putting 100% oxygen right next to me. So we usually lower it down to 30%.
Yeah.
And I always make sure you don't have a leak, because you're always thinking about these things. And so
Sure.
we've kind of known in anesthesia, they teach you get the FiO2, the oxygen concentration, down to 30%, or at least down below 40%. And then your risk of starting the endotracheal tube on fire is much less. Oxygen is not flammable. Oxygen is not explosive, but it is the ultimate electron receptor, and you can't have a flame without it. So it lights everything on fire. It's oxidizer.
Okay.
And so when you're filling these chambers with oxygen, and most hospital systems still do, it's just easy. You have liquid oxygen, or you have these big tanks, and they're 100% oxygen, and you just compress the whole thing with 100% oxygen, and the patient's in there breathing 100% oxygen. But if there's any spark, static, or anything like that,
Don't take your cell phone in there.
no. And so, even down to, all cotton pajamas,
Sure.
and even down to different oils and
Oh, wow.
essential oils, and, nothing. You're supposed to go in, like the good Lord made you, any metal, anything.
Okay.
And if you do that, and you're wearing a grounding pad, and the chambers are grounded, and everything is good, they're safe. There hadn't been a fire for years and years. But that if you don't follow the safety protocols, and you do something wrong, and you're in there at 100% oxygen, and there's any spark, you'll die.
Sure.
Now, these chambers, they were just like these, and the chambers stayed perfect, and nobody around them died, no building damage, no nothing. But both people inside
Sure.
died, and so that's kind of terrible. But what we do, like all multiplace chambers, we compress with room air, 20% oxygen. Now it goes up to 40 and 60% equivalency when you're at 3 atmospheres, but it's much less
Sure.
And we actually are venting these chambers too. So we're actually keeping the oxygen around the patient below 23.5%. And so there's almost no chance of a fire.
Okay.
And so how are the patients getting oxygen? Well, they use a mask or a hood. And so we bring the oxygen high enough pressure where they breathe it through a mask or a hood. And so they're breathing 100% oxygen, because the only place that you absorb oxygen is through your lungs, through your upper airway, trachea, your pulmonary system. And you don't need to be sitting in 100% oxygen.
Okay, that's good to know. Well, I want to take a look at your plane here because this looks pretty wild. What is this called?
These are called gyroplanes.
Gyroplanes.
Yeah.
All right, so let's take a look at your gyroplane. You're going to tell us about how you got this and what you do with this thing.
Okay.
You got a lot of wild things in this hangar.
Yeah. Well, during COVID, so I'm 57 now, but during COVID, it was 5 years ago, all of a sudden we couldn't operate. And we just did cancer and emergencies.
Okay.
And so we had a lot of time on our hands. Like I said, I was going to get my knee fixed, but then they said you can't even get elective knee surgery. So I said, well, I'm going to learn to fly. So I came over here actually and took fixed wing lessons, like in a Cessna or whatever it was. And then my brother-in-law told me about gyroplanes. I'd never heard of them. And so I read about, you get online, I said, oh my gosh, this is perfect for me. And so I went down to Missouri and took lessons in gyroplanes. But I didn't know anything about airports, aviation, and some people would argue I still don't. But but I took, you had to take a pilot's test and a written test, and I did 50 hours of dual training.
Okay.
Essentially, and then I bought one of these. It was actually a red one like this, and I flew it back from Missouri, and I was a student pilot, and I just love it. So I've been flying. It's my favorite hobby in the world.
What do you love about the gyroplanes versus the fixed wing or the helicopters?
Well, they're more affordable than helicopters because that rotor spins in the wind. There's no power to it. We get it going, and it catches the wind, lifts you up, so it's much more it's realistic as far as helicopter. That helicopter's flying around. Those are, they cost $1 million, and they cost $500,000 to maintain them. They're crazy. These things just have a pusher engine, and that spins, and so they're more like a car.
Yeah.
As far as expense-wise, and you can maintain your own. They're experimental. They have experimental written all over it, and that's the FDA makes you, and even in the back seat says, this is not a real aircraft, or this is,
But a lot of people fly them, evidently.
Yeah.
Or a certain amount of people.
Yeah. But I think you're always in auto rotation, so I think they're much safer in that sense.
Okay.
And like you saw when I was coming into the wind, you can almost go backwards and stop.
Yeah.
And they're slow and they're easy, but both these planes I flew back from Florida. And so you can fly across the country.
You're here.
Yeah. And my wife actually flew with me in that blue one. I think she was crazy, but
that's
we
amazing.
we made it, and so. But they are fun. It's just I just utterly enjoy them, and then I've learned to kind of do some some maintenance. But
Sure.
Like I said, I have no business doing the heavy duty maintenance, but.
Well, we're gonna take a look at your chambers. We're gonna take a look at your office here in a bit, and we'll take a closer look at your planes.
Okay.
Okay. So you've got a couple of planes here. One's enclosed. You said this is your favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us how this works.
So what you do is you get out there and you start the rotor, and it's all it is. It uses a belt drive, and so it just with the clutch it starts spinning the rotor, and it gets spinning, and then you start moving forward with the prop, and you pull the rotor back, and you just kind of slowly go forward, and the rotor catches the wind, and it just lifts you up, and so you're always in auto rotation. Whereas like a helicopter, the rotor goes with the motor, lifts you up, and then turns you and pulls you.
Okay.
But the rotor is just spinning in the wind. There's no power to this rotor. And then it just lifts you up, and you steer with it, and you control your power, which is just your engine power and how fast your prop spins.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of mechanism. It's very simple. And these are fixed pitch. You don't change them. And it's just simple Simon stuff. And so
it's almost like in some ways you're at the mercy of the wind to maneuver, or are you still able to control it quite a bit?
No, any plane you have to have airflow over your wing. This is my wing, and so I can fly on very windy days. On super windy days, I'm the only guy flying.
Oh, got it.
It's like because this, if you're flying a big, a big Cessna with big wings and stuff,
Right.
and you catch the wind and you think jumping and thumping and it's, lots of turbulence and it's real bumpy, whereas this thing just cuts through it. You don't even notice it. But all planes fly fine with no wind. But you create, you create your own wind with your engine. So
That's
you just
true.
get going, and as long as you have airspeed. And so, like, if you're flying to Madison and the wind is against you, I might be going about as fast as the cars on the highway. But if I'm flying with a tailwind, I might be going 135 miles an hour.
Wow. And
versus
does your
80.
wife fly with you when you're going 140 miles an hour?
Yeah, but you don't notice it. I mean, but it's the same airspeed. It's like if you're into the wind, if you're going against the wind, your airspeed's 100, and if you're going with the wind, your airspeed's 100.
So it doesn't
but
feel that different.
No,
when
it
you're
feels
playing.
exactly the same, but your ground speed is like, if you're flying into a strong headwind, it's kind of frustrating. You're almost seeing the cars go ahead of you, like, dang it. So it's not fast.
Right, right. Well, let's get back over to Midwest Hyperbarics where we can see all the chambers and all the things we've been talking about, and looking forward to that.
All right.
Nicole, welcome to Spotlight Sioux Falls. We're super impressed. We are in the lobby of your office. We were out with Dr. Todd, your husband. He tried to say better half, but I said, well, let's go and see the other half.
Yeah.
But we were flying planes, flying gyroplanes, looking at some of these other chambers outside. But this is a different deal. This is a 3-person, 20,000-pound chamber.
Yeah.
But we got to talk about that and everything else in this clinic that you've been largely, call it, running with a great team here for a long time. And a lot of people are just starting to hear about it. When did you guys come into existence in this office?
So we opened in October of 2024, and basically started out with our 2 barameds, and then we've got 3 of the what we call our clinic grade. This is our hospital grade, and this will also be hospital grade, where you can go to up to 3 atmospheres.
Yeah.
The other ones go to 2 atmospheres. So depending on what you're treating and what you're trying to achieve,
Yep.
depends on what chamber we put you in.
What am I treating? So if I come here, what are you typically seeing people for? What are the top 5 or 6 things?
We have everything from general health and wellness, which there's a large amount of people just doing that. But then we also have wound care. We have stroke victims. We've had people with PTSD. We've had people with depression. Before I opened, and when I was just had a chamber at home and sharing it with friends and family, and
in a full basement, I heard.
and yep, and just anyone that needed help, they'd call me up and say, hey, can I come over? And but people with addiction issues, how it changed, where they're like, I just don't even want it anymore.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, when I saw just the wide spectrum of everything, ADHD, anxiety, depression, you name it. And just anyone that just is already healthy, but they just want to feel even better.
Yeah. Talk to me and the audience about the science of it. This is not a new thing. And a lot of what you mentioned isn't, call it, new research. Some of it around mental health sounds like it's new. I want to dive into that in a second, but like this other stuff, the conditions that maybe some of us haven't heard of. So Nicole, tell me, what are the top 5 things that people come see you for that you're treating them with the chamber here today?
Well, usually we have the general health and wellness. We have diabetic foot wounds that won't heal. We've been able to save some limbs, so that's exciting.
That's great.
Anxiety, depression, fibromyalgia, and then just even people that have like heart issues, how they're able to get benefits.
And they're coming back and they're seeing benefits.
Yeah.
Is it they just feel better? Let's walk through that, because that's a big deal to feel better.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, what is your health worth? Everything.
How does this, not even scientifically, like what's the process like of that me feeling better versus I have 9 months to recover from a surgery? I might shorten that by what, half or?
Oh, at least half.
That's incredible.
For people that are doing a surgery, if they come in and do a couple of sessions before they go into surgery, you're reducing that inflammation down.
Yeah.
Makes the surgeon's job easier because you're not all inflamed.
Yep.
And then when you come out, I've had a few patients that come straight from straight from the hospital, and they come in and they'll do a hyperbaric session, and it cuts their healing in half or more.
All right, so tell us about this machine behind us. It's taking up the whole room behind us. This is great. What is it? How does it work? And how do you guys support it?
Okay, so this we can have 3 people go in at one time. This will go up to 3 atmospheres, but we don't always treat at 3 atmospheres. We can change the pressure to whatever it is that we're treating.
Got it.
We can expand this up to 14 people if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Right now we're just started with 3, so.
Well, you're growing as a clinic, and I think
Yep.
that even we've, since we've been familiar with you, we've even seen a little bit of that growth here the last kind of month and a half in real time. That's fun. When you think about Sioux Falls, which is the community you're serving in the surrounding area, the physicians, those people who need your treatment, what do you see the growth like in, I'm sure you see it as something, right? You just invested a lot of money to bring this here to help treat patients. What does that look like?
You know, we're getting busier and busier all the time, and we're finding that even in our hospital grade chambers that we have running over here, we're running out of availability. So we're really excited to have this available for people to come in and, and I'm willing to even open up our hours as well. So
you don't buy these when you're not getting business. You have to buy these when you're expanding. I love
Right.
that, because that to me is a sign that people are feeling better. They're referring probably other people.
yeah.
If I'm out there and I'm thinking, my gosh, I have a shoulder surgery, we talked about that. I've got an aging parent who's maybe dealing with this. I have concerns about wound care with the coming up surgery. Are you willing just to have people, can they just call you and ask
Yeah.
you and Dr. Todd questions, and the staff here,
Yeah.
even if they're not a patient yet?
Yes. And we also offer a free 15-minute consult with our nurse practitioner. Where
great.
if people are just curious about it and they want to know if it would work for them or they would be a candidate, they can come in and have a free consultation. And then if it does work, then we can turn that into a full consultation, or they can schedule one of those. And with that also, they're able to do a mini trial session to make sure that they're able to pop their ears.
Yeah,
and
that's a big
that
deal.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I hate to say try it before you buy it, but I mean, everybody's got to be curious about
Yeah.
like, well, what is it like? What is the process?
Yeah.
So I could come in, I could ask those questions, and I say to you, I'm interested in moving ahead. I don't need to be insured or insured. It wouldn't matter, right, to you guys?
Right.
Now, what if I like it so much, I come in all the time, you say, wait, this doesn't make sense anymore. You should buy your own chamber.
Right.
How do am I no longer your customer? Can I get that through you guys?
We actually have a home chamber sales as well.
Got
so
it. That's a big deal.
yeah, and the ones that we're gonna send for home use they're gonna go to 2 atmospheres.
Got it.
And the ones that we have available are all hard chambers, and
Yep. Not the soft cloth bags.
No, we have one of those left, but those pressures are 1.5.
Got it.
But to get a good treatment, you really want to be right around that 2 atmospheres. And that's actually what I started with.
Yeah.
And found a lot of healing.
Now,
in
where
that.
you started was pretty cool, and this is the story as I heard it. Now, check my memory as we wrap up here, because I think this is where I went, wow, like Nicole's been behind this. Like Dr. Todd's over here doing all these other things, and
Yeah.
he's helping you, but you were the one who, when Dr. Todd was kind of looking onto your work, he just kept having people come to the basement, and they wanted
Right.
treatments, and finally I said, you know what, I'll try it, because, I mean, they keep coming back. And that was sort of you kept that basement full before you ever said, we
Right.
got to grow up and go get a place now, because we just can't fit it all here
Right.
anymore.
Well, I was on my own health journey and was helping a friend at her house who had a chamber.
Yeah.
And she had said, try it out. So I did. And then from there, I told Dan, I'm buying one of these. And so he was like, okay, whatever. He's always so supportive. And so I ended up getting one, having it in my basement. But I was feeling so much better that I just was just telling other people, you need to come and try this.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, my chamber was running 20 hours a day. So
Wow.
we bought another one. And then the next one was running 20 hours a day. So my sister might come over at midnight
Yeah.
and jump in. And then
Oh, wow.
somebody's going to go to work at 5, so they'd come over. And then I just said, there's a need in this community.
All right, so Sioux Falls, between Dr. Todd, and I get to call him Dan now, by the way, so now I got to force myself to call you Dan, a great guy, and Nicole, who obviously we found out, knows a lot and is going to be a great tour guide, and you're pretty awesome to hang out with. But on a serious note, you guys are shaking up the scene of, call it, treatments that people have been looking for and they need to be educated. So thank you for bringing that to Sioux Falls. I know with Melissa with a medical background, when we leave here, the head is just spinning and talking, so I love it. Thank you for being on Spotlight Sioux Falls. You guys are going to be back. This is an entire episode, but you're going to be seeing more of you guys. So you're going to be around quite a bit on the regular. If there's anything you want to hear them talk about, any questions, drop it in the comments below. Thank you, and we will be back with the next episode very soon. Thanks for listening to Spotlight Sioux Falls.
These are the stories and the businesses that shape our city. If you heard something today that made you smile, made you think, or maybe reminded you of someone you know in your neighborhood, please share it.
That's how we support local. That's how we grow. And if you know a business owner we should feature, or you want to tell your story, reach out.
Until next time, we're Steve and Melissa, and this is Spotlight Sioux Falls, where local stories get the stage they deserve.